Welcome to Family Life Blended. I am Ron Deal from the home office of Family Life here in Little Rock, Arkansas. Today we're going to be talking about coping with a difficult co-parent, an ex-spouse, or a former partner relationship. And you share children and you need to try to cooperate as best you can, but the other person is difficult. That's what we're going to be talking about today. I'm glad that you're joining me. Feel free to send me your name and maybe where you're watching from today. It's great to have people. I can see folks kind of chiming in a little bit. Carrie and Nuvia and Nikki and Tyler. And yeah, so drop us a line. Send us a little comment and tell me where you guys are watching from or listening from. And by the way, tap that screen, give us some hearts and love and all that kind of stuff. That just means that Facebook will share this with more people when they see that kind of activity and response coming from our viewers. So that's helpful. We can reach more. We're not going to be talking about parent alienation today. We are going to be talking about just dealing with difficult co-parenting situations. What you can do, and especially in light of conversations, I'm going to be focusing on attitudes to have and conversations, how you go about interacting with that other household, that other person. I am going to be drawing from a number of different sources today and some of the things that I'm going to be sharing with you. First of all, I'm going to be talking a little bit right out of my book, The Smart Step Family. I encourage you to get that if you don't have it. There's an entire chapter in there on dealing with co-parent situations and ex-spouses, and all throughout the book we talk about challenging situations. I also love and appreciate the work by Tammy Daughtry, my friend. Co-Parenting Works, great book focused specifically on co-parenting matters. I'm going to be drawing from some of the research from Dr. Robert Emery. His latest book is Two Homes, One Childhood. By the way, I realize that may be backwards for you, but that's what it says. Two Homes, One Childhood, talking about parenting plans. Dr. Emery has spent a career studying co-parenting, parenting after divorce, and has some very insightful things to say. And also on FamilyLife.com, we have an article that I've written called Coping with a Difficult Ex-Spouse is the title of that article. Coping with a Difficult Ex-Spouse. And so I'm going to be drawing some ideas and themes from these various sources for our time today. To get started, let me ask you a question. By the way, Liz, great book. Hey, thanks. Appreciate that. Thumbs up. Yeah, if you're just joining, drop me a comment and let me know where you're viewing from. That's always fun to know where people are and share this with others once it gets on your feed. Let me ask you a couple of questions. Here's a couple of scenarios for you to think about, and I want you to ask yourself, how would I feel if this were happening to me? Okay, so here's the first scenario. You are riding on a public transit bus or a train or a subway or something of that sort, right? And two people sitting very close to you. Maybe you're kind of crammed up in this small space, and two people start having a fight. They're having an argument. It's right there next to you. There's nothing you can do. There's nowhere you can go. How do you feel? Somebody send me a response. Well, how do you feel in that situation? Scenario number two. You're hanging out with two of your closest friends, right? Just spending a little time together, hanging out, the three of you. Hurst, Texas. Stacy in Hurst, Texas. Nice to have you with us. You're hanging out with a couple of friends, and they start fighting. And they start referencing you somehow. Like somehow you get pulled into this whole thing. Right, Nuvia, right. You're going to feel uncomfortable. Exactly. Your friends start fighting, and you're all of a sudden there, and you care for both of them, and you want them to stop and kind of, get their heads together and come together around this thing. But it doesn't stop there, right? They go to separate corners, if you will, and then sometime after that little fight has taken place, one of them calls you and wants to know what you thought, and basically is kind of pulling on you to join them against the other. Well, they're both your friends, and you don't like that idea, and that doesn't feel right to you, and you don't want to take sides because you know that's just going to polarize them even further. Exactly. And then the other person calls you a little bit later, sends you a text, and they want your opinion. Like basically they're fishing for your support. Like, you agree with me, right? All right, so how do you feel in those situations? Well, yeah, you feel uncomfortable. You feel awkward. You feel stuck in the middle, right? You feel torn between the people that you care about and the friends and what's going on. Maybe you start trying to fix them. Maybe you start trying to be the mediator or the coach and draw them together. Maybe you pretend to be on one person's side when you're talking to that one person anyway, right? And you want them to feel like you support them and love them and comforting them. But then when you're talking to the other person, you're on their side as far as they can tell. And you do that on purpose because you do honestly and genuinely care for them. You care for both. You're not trying to be manipulative. You're just trying to demonstrate your love and care for them. But it does appear like you've joined on their side. Well, these are all the things that kids feel when co-parents, parents who are not together anymore, whether by divorce or a breakup of a relationship, still have the job of managing, parenting these children. When they have their fights and their arguments, this is the way your kids feel because they've been stuck in the middle. Nuvia says she's been there before. It's hard. You definitely try to mediate. Exactly. You're trying to help bring them together. And by the way, if you can't bring them together and you feel you get to that place of utter disappointment and defeat in that, what do? You kind of give up. And what most kids do is they retreat at that point from both of those two people. Sometimes kids take advantage of your dividedness. They can see there's chink in the armor and they can divide and conquer, and they use that to their advantage and they manipulate. Occasionally, kids will just get disrespectful towards both parents. It's like they dishonor you, they resent you, they blame. And sometimes they just pull away in disobedience. And all of that is kind of an outgrowth of this inability of these two parents to come together. Sometimes you are doing your best to be a cooperative co-parent, but you have a difficult co-parent that you have to deal with. Let's talk today about practically what can you do in those situations, because I think it is still incumbent upon you to do what you can. So let's talk about what you can, and especially in light of how to have conversations when you have to have them. I'm going to start with a couple of attitude adjustments, okay? And right off the bat, I may go to meddling here. So I hope I'm not offending anybody. Actually, I don't care. If you are a difficult ex or you're dealing with a difficult ex, I want you to listen up, because you want to take your kids out of being stuck in the middle. So let's start with this. Notice, number one, notice your part of the dance, of the conflict that is going on with the difficult ex. Now, let me just pause for a minute, because when I said we're going to talk about difficult former spouses and co-parenting, you probably begin to think, oh, please, give me the answer that will make this other person nice. Yeah, see, that's part of the problem. You're in a posture of, I do nothing wrong, they do everything wrong, which means you are blind to what you are doing that might contribute to this. I'm not blaming you. I'm not saying it's all your fault. I'm not suggesting that whatsoever. I'm just saying that we always have a part in a difficult relationship. Even if you're doing your best, sometimes there is something that you need to recognize that you are contributing to the conflict, and you always have to start with that. So I want to just start with this. I think there are a lot of upright, good, decent, well-intentioned, moral people, dare I even say Christian folk, who think that they are kind of spiritually, superior. And they would never put it that way, but they do have this condescending attitude about this other person. And maybe it's tied up in your history. Maybe they had an affair and that ended your marriage. And you have deep hurt around that, some perhaps resentment around that. You've seen the pain in your children's eyes as a result of that hardship and breakup. It is true. It is difficult. It is hard. And that seed of bitterness still sits in your heart. And when you deal with them, you look down on them and you think, you know what, you're bad and I'm good. And I have every right to assert this. I have every right to tell you that you should parent differently. I have every right to, whatever it is, you feel like you should be able to. Now, notice what I want you to see then that is that you now are part of the problem. That spiritual one-up attitude gets reflected in how you interact and relate. And And all of a sudden, all you can see is what the other person is doing, and you're not recognizing it in yourself. You got to start by looking in the mirror. Please do that. Don't have a moral self-righteousness about it. If you have hurt and anger that's embedded in your heart, you got to wrestle with forgiveness. You do. Because otherwise you sit back and just judge the other person and don't notice the part that you're doing. Let me give you a specific example. So many times I've worked with people who come in and they have a deep frustration about what the other former spouse is doing, how it's affecting the co-parenting, the between-home relationship, the kids, et cetera, et cetera. And one of the things that this person doesn't recognize is that you're still trying to control them. It's kind of like, wait a minute, I'm the better parent, I'm the superior parent, I didn't do anything wrong, I didn't bring about the divorce, and therefore the way I think parenting ought to happen is the way the other person ought to do it. That's controlling. You don't want them telling you what to do, but you feel like you can tell them? Why? Just because they made a mistake that they need to be forgiven for and definitely held accountable for, but all of a sudden then that just gives you privilege? I don't think so. Let's start with that. Do a gut check. That's number one. Number two, this is an attitude adjustment perhaps for the step-parent who is sometimes involved in a situation where there's another home. And I want to encourage you to have a no-threat posture. If you've read anything I've ever done and written about in terms of co-parenting ex-spouses, I recommend what I like to call the no-threat message. And it goes simply like this. If you're a stepmom, for example, that you communicate to the biological mother, look, I know that you're the mom and I'm not. I want you to know that I know that you're the mom and I'm never going to try to take your place. And I'm going to speak well of you behind your back and I'm going to support you as best I can, and you let me know if the kids showed up at your house and they're lacking something, and I'll get it right, and next time we'll do better. And I just want you to know that you're the mom. Now that's very important because a lot of times difficult ex-spouses are difficult because they feel threatened by what's happening in your home. Sometimes they're threatened by, well, you just have a nicer home and more stuff and all the latest media, et cetera, et cetera. And now there's this step-parent. And so the biological mother feels threatened by the stepmother's presence, for example. And so she is angry and bitter in the co-parenting negotiations and conversations because she's afraid of losing her kids to the stepmom. Step-parents, you have to let the other person know that you are not a threat to them, that you are not taking their kids, that you're going to honor their position as mom or dad, whatever the case may be, and that you're never going to get in the way of their relationship with their kids. They have to know that. Sometimes you can't even communicate that no-threat message because things are so tense between homes. Quick story, I got an email a few years ago, I'll never forget, came with a picture. And in this picture are two women standing side by side, and one of the women is holding a baby, okay? And here's the backstory. There's the biological mother who's holding the baby and the stepmother who's standing beside her. And that baby doesn't belong to the biological mother in this step-family situation. That baby belonged to this stepmother. Stepmother's letting the bio mom hold her child. That shows you some trust, doesn't it? Right. It didn't start that way. See, for these two people, they started off as enemies and they were angry. There's a lot of bitterness between homes. And the stepmom got caught up in all of that stuff going on between her husband and his ex, the biological mother. And the stepmom knew she couldn't even communicate this no-threat message to the biological mother. But what she could do is tell her children, her stepchildren, hey, look, I think well of your mother. Make sure you let her know that we talk well about it. She just communicated through the kids, if you will. And the kids naturally did. Kind of brought that good, that attitude with them back over to mom's house. And over time, mom got a sense that the stepmother really was a decent person and started to drop her guard, started to be less defensive about the stepmother. The threat level came down, and eventually they became friends. And then when the stepmother had a child of her own with her husband, here she is standing side by side with her friend. They have little nice exchanges when they drop off kids and whatnot. And she's even trusting this other woman who was once very angry and bitter towards her to hold her baby. That says a lot about how far they've come. Have a no-threat posture towards the other parent. Let them know that and live that way. And see if that doesn't help reduce some of the negativity between you. Now let's talk a little bit about conversations. Here's another thing you can do. Deborah, I'm sorry. Ex-spouse is an alcoholic who unfortunately cannot co-parent. Yes, that is unfortunate. Situations like that, my goodness, you just want to pray, continue to pray that that person's life would change and that there would be growth and that they could come back into the picture with decency and responsibility. And we certainly would hope that for you as well. Okay, so let's get back to talking about conversations. Thank you from Spain, Henriette, I'm not sure how to say that. I'm sure I crucified it. Sorry about that. But it's nice to have you with us. Here's something I want you to do when you're doing between-home communication. Try to have very impersonal, if it needs to be. Let's call them business meetings, all right? Business meetings, meaning you have an attitude that you would have if you were negotiating a contract, working a deal with another business, another person representing another business. It's the personal stuff that gets in the way of the parenting stuff. And when either one of you allows that old marital junk, personal breakup, whatever that story is, to constantly be infiltrating your mind and affecting the parenting situation going on right now, then things get messed up. Have a business mentality. If you were trying to create a sale with another company, you were trying to go to them. And by the way, if you have a difficult ex, this is kind of what it's like, right? You're motivated to try to get them to buy your product. And in this case, buying the product means being decent and kind and just reasonable in how they deal with you. And you would go to them and you would do everything you can to try to soften that interaction, to present in a pleasant way, to invite them to dialogue with you, learn more about this product, right? What are the possibilities? You would be long-suffering. Why? Because you're chasing their willingness to connect with you and to find the middle ground, the win-win. And it can be so hard because difficult exes by definition are difficult. They're not easy when it comes to this. But don't give up. Do your part to keep it on that impersonal business-like level. So what do I mean by that? Find a good time to have conversations when you have to have them. Be brief in these little business meetings. Be in a public place where everybody's going to mind their P's and Q's because other people are watching. If you have to be impersonal in terms of how you communicate, face-to-face is too tough, do it by email, do it by text, try to keep it brief. Stick to the parental issue. That's very, very important. Like when the issue gets off track, like here we are trying to talk about drop-off and pick-up times, or something's changed with a child's schedule, and so I just need to make sure you know about that. And all of a sudden, the other party throws at you. I talk about this in the Smart Step Family book. The other party throws at you, well, it's just because you're an idiot. And they go to criticism, and they go to contempt, and all of a sudden they're bringing up the past. That's all personal. Do your best to not respond to that personal accusation, that criticism. That's irrelevant. This is a moment about parenting. Have a little standard response you come back with, something like, I get it, this is frustrating, but we still need to figure out how we're going to pick up Johnny. I still need to understand what I need to bring for this weekend when he's with you. Tell me how to pack. Go right back, deflect the personal, go right back towards the parental as best you can. That's just your discipline in trying to do that, and that will help hopefully over time to make a difference. Here's another suggestion. Use a script to help you stay on task. Like if you know you got to have a phone call, write it out. Get a little card, type it into your phone, something so that you have some notes to say, here's where I'm going in this conversation, here's what we're talking about. And then maybe put down, anticipate what you know the other person's going to do or how they react. You know how the dance goes, right? You kind of have a sense of how they usually respond. Remind yourself, don't take the bait. Don't, if they throw out this, don't talk about that. Stay on task as best you can. And if worst comes to worst, sometimes the best thing you can do, the lesser of the evils, is not escalate the conflict, but just shut it down. To just say, you know what, I can tell this is not a good time for us to talk about this. I'll try to call you back in a little while. And you hang up. I get it. sometimes there's nothing you can do that's going to make the other side happy in that conversation, that exchange, and they are just difficult. But at least ending it is better than an escalation of things. Maybe it does calm down. Maybe you try to call an hour later. And who knows? Maybe that makes a difference. It's you being disciplined to manage you is ultimately where your power and your strength is with somebody who is really hard to deal with. Another couple of suggestions that I would offer you to is never put kids in the middle. Never put kids in the middle. Don't ask them to be the communicators. Don't say to them, what do you think? Don't have these exchanges. If you know they're going to get a difficult exit, the history is there. There's going to be some conflict. Don't do it within earshot of the children, because all of that implies to kids that they need to choose a side. And like the little scenarios we started this with, you didn't want to choose if there's two friends having a fight. Your kids don't want to choose between you. Do your best to not expose them to it. Now, if the other side initiates the conflict with the kids present, what do you do? I don't think this is the time or place for us to interact around this. There are ears that are listening. I will call you in an hour, and you turn and walk away. You end that call. You cut it off and turn and walk. If you're face to face and you turn and walk and they start following, just keep going. You're doing everything you can to not expose the children to that level of hostility and conflict between the two of you. That's so important, so helpful. It's not a win. You're just trying to diminish how much the kids lose, and that's worth something. I talked earlier about wrestling with forgiveness. I don't mean that in a very trite. I'm not just throwing that out saying, forgive and just move on. It's never that easy. It's not because often you have to forgive about what happened in the past, but you have to forgive about what happened today, right? It's an ongoing issue. It's never easy. But keep pressing your heart in that direction, because ultimately, if you're holding all of that, it will invade, and it will turn you into the person you don't want to be. And you've got to try to overcome the evil with good as best you can. Last suggestion, again, an attitude adjustment. Work really hard to respect the other home. You may not like them. You may not appreciate their lifestyle, their values, their choices, their decisions, the influence on the children. There may be a lot of things that you have issue with. But try to respect them as people, and the fact that they have rights and they're a parent and they're connected and there's an appropriateness to their role as a parent in the life of your child. Do your best to honor that. Maybe all you can do is just respect that the law says that they get time, and this is now on their visitation time. Have a heart that just tries to respect that. Sometimes, not all the time, sometimes that level of respect is caught, and the other home, the difficult person, begins to soften. If you lead, and I'll say it this way, if you lead with love, and what love would do in that situation, not cowering, not accommodating to everything about them, but if you just try to lead with decency and love, sometimes it changes a heart. Well, it's been good to have you with us. We're doing a little series right now, Facebook Lives, Wednesdays at noon Central. Tell a friend. If you don't follow us at Family Life Blended, please follow us. You can catch future installments of our Facebook Lives. And if you're not familiar with Family Life Blended, my goodness, come to FamilyLife.com/blended and just click around. We got lots of stuff. We want to try to help you and your family go the distance. FamilyLife.com/blended. God bless.